ever submit.
So anyway, I had
Have you received it yet? It's supposed to be in by the end of last year.
Yeah. Oh. No.
September
It's supposed
3rd.
to rotate. Of Yeah. last year?
It's
or
supposed
this
No,
year?
this year. It was due on September 3rd.
So according to who?
Well, no, you just need to make the full
They
size.
said it was going to be.
Oh, yeah, no, it's been pushed out many times since then.
Okay, last year. There you go.
There goes.
They're working on a number of different
Microsoft
aspects.
Catching up, catching up.
They have unlimited funds?
No, no,
I thought they had a fixed price
they
contract.
do. That dude's
How
helping
could it keep
I am not versed
Because
in
Patrick is-
PCs. I have not used a PC in years.
They're getting their
Although I
money
say
worth, I
that,
think.
but at the same time, I'm running
I feel sorry
Windows
for that
XP
consultant.
and Windows 10 on my
Yeah.
Mac, so.
Yeah, he's not making $1.29.
No, he's not. No. Patrick's putting a lot of his time, Patrick Connors currently, spending a lot of time on that.
I was a consultant
this.
for 2 years, had my own business. Thank you very much.
Never will work for in your life.
Oh, this is the Olmsted article, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see that. You started telling me about what happened in 2018, but I guess we'll do that. We'll talk about that later. You started to say what happened in 2018, but we're going to talk about that later.
It was an investigation on short-term rentals. He actually made a recommendation offered a draft modification of the CPO.
To allow that?
Well, just to put, I mean,
So how your safety gun, it didn't work.
basically, they made a Senate tax, House Bill 1415, but they actually get
I don't think it's that.
How you doing?
But
Thank you.
I think that they're just waiting to have all that.
Good evening,
Afternoon, evening,
Guten Tag.
whatever it is.
whatever it is.
I got up at 4:30, so.
As long as it's not like-
I got up at
You haven't taken
4:30.
a nap yet?
Oh, I quit moving.
Naps are for wusses.
Hey.
The time for sleeping when he's dead,
I
right?
tried to get.
Right? No?
No.
You know, if I can fall into a nap now and then, I'm not gonna complain.
I believe in the siesta, man. I think they have it right.
It's a mini vacation. I said, you start running beer now?
It's No Shave November. This is 9 days.
Oh, he was on vacation this last week.
Yeah.
No?
No, that was last month.
No,
Oh,
this
that's
is
right.
9 days. I've been at work every day. It's gradually growing on me, literally. Council SharePoint. Finance. Investment plan.
HTS already did their magic on my end. Now I'm waiting for the printer people to come and look at that printer because April and do it that way.
How did I keep going with that? Waiting for your happening and now I'm waiting for the CPS voters?
It's a world full of
Version of copy break is a thing. Bun, suck, little copy at a time.
Okay, here, we're looking at this one.
Yeah, Castroville Community Complex, that's it.
It shows modified July 28th.
Yeah, that's the right date. It's version 3. It's the one I was going to give when I
Oh,
was
okay.
originally scheduled to give it, which was July 25th, 7th.
Okay.
I've only been waiting 5 months. But that's all right.
What's time?
You told me you'd let me give it at the appropriate time.
I
I guess
it's not
reached
accurate apparently. Which is not uncommon.
Are we really using the curse whiteboard?
Sands of time.
What?
The cursed
Are we really using
whiteboard.
the
Hey,
cursed whiteboard?
y'all washed it clean the last time we met. Because it didn't, no issues came.
You have gold stars
Save.
up there, it's all good.
That's true, we did use it
We've
one
reclaimed
time.
it, okay, fair
Yeah,
enough.
reclaim it.
Restored and refreshed.
Go look at water fountains. They have their water fountains right now.
I'll go get them.
So what, good evening, sir.
Water that about that for them, but they're, I love them, they're very.
They're not for right now.
But I'll get them.
Yeah, Robertson's up to P and Z here.
Change that to major.
Just remind me.
Good job.
Thank you. I was in a high-speed wobble all the way
money
here.
on some bifocals, so I didn't have to look over my glasses and I've lost it.
How are you feeling?
Go
A
buy
little
one.
better. I got a massage tomorrow at 2:15.
First one.
No,
Lidocaine?
no, just
It was like,
ginger. Just trying to take it easy, not overdo it. I feel pretty good today.
We'll see how you feel at the end of the day.
So you sit in that chair real long, we'll see.
By the
We
way,
have it at the ready. Week later.
Kelly's case, head of the group. No.
They were amazing.
I had a couple of
Down in
samples.
my back.
I suspect that happened.
Yeah.
That's not catching.
Are you the official taster?
Well,
I ended up being at the airport till
too.
5:30 that day. I was at the airport till 5:30.
I really missed not being able to go over there
Yeah,
on
it
Saturday.
was good.
Yeah.
That was the hubby's birthday, so.
No. Well, it was a lot of fun.
I'm sure it was. I would have loved to have toured it. It was, it was antique aircraft or quite a marvel.
Oh, that had to have been fun.
All right, we ready?
Yes.
Look at you, right on the mark.
Yes, it's recorded.
All right, so we're going to call this meeting to order. It is straight up 3 o'clock. Let's have a roll call.
Sheena Martinez, District 1.
Paul Carey, District 2.
Philip King, District 3.
Todd Sherhard, District 4.
Herb Dyer, District 5.
And Darren Schroeder, Mayor. All right, so everybody's here. Citizens' comments. Come on, guys. Next item, discussion on capital improvement projects and finance options, including but not limited to River Bluff electric upgrades, drainage, streets, utility metering upgrades.
Okay, so this is your workshop. I have some things that we can go over, but really it's just, I want to make, since tonight at the 5 o'clock meeting, we're going to do a notice of intent to go issue debt. I wanted to make sure we had a good conversation about how this money can be spent. It will not be the last time we talk about planning and that kind of thing, but we are getting closer, I think, to what is a good draft of the CIP. So with your permission, I'll just start, since I just did.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to kind of remind you where we've been as a group and as a council, that whiteboard over on Sheena's side of the room is what we ended up with at our last capital planning workshop that was facilitated by Ron Cox, who, by the way, will be back next May to talk to us a little bit more, not just about implementation of this plan, but about good governance and other strategies, for you all. So this is kind of where we started, just to kind of get an idea of what this council's priorities are. It's not meant to be all encompassing, and it was our very, very rough draft with very, very rough numbers. Prior to my employee with the city, you all had a CIP, but it was not funded. And therein lied a little bit of confusion, because I think there were council members that honestly thought that there was money appropriated when it wasn't, or there had been money borrowed when it hadn't been, and what was the funding situation. So I think we've had plenty of conversation around that. But I wanted to show you, I should have it. This one, okay. Because I opened it as a link. Can I close that? So this is a blending of the prior CIP. So what you'll see that's missing from some of that stuff up on that whiteboard are things like water lines and sewer lines, and besides River Bluff, his electric improvements and that kind of stuff. So, and in fact, I told you, if you may recall during the meeting, that you don't worry about the utilities. We've already kind of got a plan for utilities. And what I was referring to was the prior CIP. So a lot of this information that's in this CIP is from the old plan. It's been massaged a little bit because one of the things we did was our rate study, which identified exactly how much can we borrow, how much will our rates support. What we found out was that given the rate structure that we've recently adopted, we're able to go borrow about $6 million a year for utilities. We have more need than $6 million a year. There's more that we could do if we had more money, but we don't. That's kind of our cap, that's our limit. So when we talk about living within our means and trying to manage the system, we're talking about managing within our borrowing capacity, which on the utility side is $6 million a year. And the good news is, in some respects, is that really if we were to attempt to do even more, we probably wouldn't be able to. It would be a real challenge. It'd be a real challenge to make that happen, just with the staffing we have, with the amount of projects that would be required to spend more than that on an annual basis. The other limitation we have is obviously on the general fund and the general fund borrowing side, and that had to do with our tax rate, where we really willing to go out and borrow money and make these investments. And as you all know, the council adopted a 0.5233 rate, and we are committing to doing that rate for several years by committing to these funds. That's where that TRIA document that Samco will again share later this evening. They'll bring it back up, they'll show the timeline, that kind of thing, which just lays out how much we can borrow. And we know that we can borrow, if we wanted to, we could actually borrow $10 million in the general fund this year. We're not recommending doing that. We're actually going to borrow $10 million, but only 5 of it in the general fund and 5 of the utility fund. The utility fund would support $6 million, but we're not going to borrow 6, we're going to borrow 5. And the reason we're doing this is twofold. One is to stay underneath that cap, this bank qualified. You get a little bit better borrowing. And honestly, in today's market, with the rates as low as they are, it's not a lot, but it's just in the interest of being frugal. We're staying underneath the cap by only borrowing $10 million. The other reason is because when we started looking at general fund projects, we really didn't need $10 million. Not right away. We do want to fix streets, we want to do other things, but really we're trying to pace ourselves $2 to $2.5 million a year. And you'll see at the bottom of this CIP, which I'll show you in a minute, that's how these dollars kind of trickle out and what they look like as we go out in time. So we limited ourselves to 10. We're planning on borrowing more money next year for the utility fund. I don't know what that amount will be. We'll talk as we get closer to that time period. Right now, when we look at the totals, let's just skip down there and I'll show you. So what I've literally done is kind of made this colors of money, so you can kind of differentiate between where the funding is coming from at a glance. So this kind of orangish color, that's private funded, and by private, generally, we're talking about is developer funded. If it's in blue, then it's a grant or some other intergovernmental support. So in this case, this would be county. Now again, these are just estimates. These are not, I have not had a conversation with Larry Sitter about doing $80,000 worth of work in a parking lot, but he has committed to supporting the city. He has committed to doing streets. He has committed to doing this size of project, around $50,000 a year is what he said he would probably do. So, and he's alluded that he might even be able to do more than that, since we do have a special tax in place just for his district that our taxpayers are paying for. So we're looking at utilizing the county wherever we can, but probably not on our main roads. We're going to contract that out or maintain it ourselves. And part of that is because he's got his own roads to fix. So by choosing roads that are non-residential, aren't high traffic, he can kind of do them, the county can do them whenever they can get to them. And so think about the roads around the park, in any of our parks areas, any of the city parking lots, any of the back roads like to the wastewater treatment plant or to the Cross Hill tank. Those are all roads that the city uses, that the city owns, that the city has to maintain, but we're going to see if the county would be willing to help us with those. And I think hopefully it'll be something, again, I haven't talked to the county yet, but hopefully it'll be something they'll also be interested in, because it gives them the freedom to kind of just do things when they can or when they need to. So that's blue. And then the stuff in tan, that just means that it's going to be funded with bond money, or potentially using, when it says utilities O&M, that means cash on hand. So then at the bottom of this, and this will be shared with you, I think you have the older version of it, the October version. This has been updated. It is different. One of the ways it's different is I've extended it out 10 years, as Councilman Dyer had requested. It's also different in that, as we started to look at those numbers, as I shared with you before, they weren't exactly right. I mean, we had too much money in a given year, and we had to look at, plus some of the projects, realistically, we didn't have dollars in the year that we were probably going to be spent, and that's still the case. I think this is much better, but it's still not 100% accurate. And I'll give you a couple examples. I'll zoom in on them. But just to look at this, so the general fund, what you see is, again, colors of money. That top bar is the total in the general fund. Then you have your all sources, and this is by year, so that's coming from whatever, any of the buckets of money, including grants and private contributions. Then I start to break them out. Cash, general fund, that's actually at present, the only thing we're spending cash on is technology. And these numbers are just, it's 15 grand a year, but is it really 15 grand a year? No. I just plugged a number in. It'll be what it is. I know that we have a server that's going to have to be replaced. That could be cost. That could be $24,000. I don't know. But other than that, our computers probably need to be replaced on a pretty regular schedule. We'll develop a technology budget, and there is one out there. And I honestly, Lydia left HTS. We're looking at maybe going out for bid for a new IT company. Doesn't mean HTS won't be the same one going forward, but we're going to look at other options. And so without all that left here, I've just kind of put in a round number. Cash utility fund, that's going to be, and you can kind of click on these and see where it's going. That's going to be tree trimming in the electrical, and it's going to be just infrastructure maintenance in the same way that some of the streets maintenance is being done. This is on a little bit smaller scale. It's around $40,000 that we spend on capital improvements just on an annual basis. So we're putting it over here in the capital plan because it's capital, but we'll actually be using cash to fund that. And the utility fund can afford $40,000 a year. And again, this is our tree trimming and removal. And you can see it's not in every year because we do it every couple of years. So that's the cash portion of the utility fund. Then the other colors of money are new bonds for the general fund. And as I stated before, we're looking at about $2.5 million a year on average. This is 4.9 between the 2 years. There's your sum, or 4.6 between the 2 years. And then the next 2 years, you're a little bit over 5. Now, once we get out into these outer years, I have not done the calculus, if you will, to see how much money can we borrow. So when you think about the general fund specifically, not the utility fund, the general fund, you need to think about the outer years. Anything beyond the first 4 as unfunded, because what we've identified is $10 million in borrowing. The outer years, in part because I think by the time we get 4 years in, there'll be considerable development on the east side and who knows where else. There'll be a changing tax, the tax rate will have changed considerably, because as new properties come on and values go up, our tax rate actually goes down. So we've kind of held it solid at 0.5233 for 3 years, but truthfully, when you get into year 3 and year 4, that rate, even though we're going to hold we're going to keep investing in INS at a specific rate. I don't have the TRI yet, but I think it was 11 cents, 12 cents into that interest and sinking debt service fund amount. The overall rate may very well drop. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so with that in mind, with also the need for more officers, police officers, and some other things, I think that it's just better for us mentally to think, okay, these are unfunded, and let's not hyper focus on exactly what beyond year 4 is.
Can I make a comment about that?
Mm-hmm.
But in the development agreement for Alsatian Oaks, there is money
Yes.
planned for that.
Yes.
And when they laid out the plan by year, we shouldn't think of it as totally unfunded because we know those funds are going to come.
Correct, but I'm concerned about there's just a lot of moving parts.
It's not all of it.
The INS rate will be solid at 12 cents. We'll be able to, so the debt service is fine. And so we do have some forecasts, but it just gets more and more murky. On the O&M side, there's a little bit of a concern, and it really comes into, do you want to do some horse trading between INS and O&M at some point in the future? And that's for a future council to decide. This council, we've already committed to being able to borrow this, that, but frankly, whoever's up here in 4 years is going to decide whether they're going to borrow more money. We can put together a plan that would support it, which we are definitely doing. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Herb. All that's out there, but that's just for Alsatian Oaks. And now we already have another development agreement in place with Endura, and we're going to have more, I'm sure.
But they'll have
They'll have
the
their own
same-
pro formas in them.
It'll be the
Right.
same format,
Right.
so there'll be some money in there that we can certainly count on.
It'll
Not
be a
enough.
similar, I'd say it'd be a similar format.
I think that we expect it, we just don't plan it, yeah. We don't count on it.
Yeah.
Just
So-
to reduce risk, but you're absolutely right, that with the growth, that is one of the things that will come.
Well, the other thing
Waste
is,
of time.
when you look at outer years, the reason I say to think about it as unfunded is, so we have 10 million, when you look at the general fund bonds, the first 4 years, we have roughly $10 million in borrowing, which is fine, we're good. Borrow that, we're good. But the outer years, depending on what we spend it on, we've got 20 million. And I don't know if, anyway, we'll just keep it kind of as guesswork. But as we get into year 23 and 24, these numbers will be updated. We'll have, we'll continue to work with Samco. Thank you very much. This is for later. We'll continue to work with Samco and our financial advisors and get updated numbers. And this will just be part of our planning process on an annual basis. The CIP will be updated every year as we look at our spending, what we're doing, etc. The utility fund, on the utility fund side, this is the one that's causing me the most heartache because we're only borrowing $5 million this year. Perfect. I'm just under $5 million. As long as everything stays about where it is, then we're good. But next year, look what happens. We have 7.7 that I'm predicting to spend. Now the following 2 years, it's not too bad because remember, we know we can borrow 6 every year. So the following 2 years will be fine. So what I've explained, what I share with the financial advisor, I'm sure with you all, is I've massaged this as much as I think I'm comfortable doing, and I'll show you what these numbers are and what's contributing to 7.7. But the fact of the matter is I know for a fact this is wrong. I know that the spending won't be exactly in the amounts that we've identified. It's going to depend on when the work gets started, when they start hitting us with their bills for doing that work, and then when the work is ultimately completed. And so it's just a guessing game right now. But right now it's at 7.7, and if worst comes to worst, we're borrowing 5 here. Next year, currently we're planning to borrow 6. We could borrow more. But worst case scenario, we borrow 6 and then we use cash to pay any bills that come in. And then next year, when we can borrow 6 again, but we only need 3.7, maybe we borrow 6. But we put in a reimbursement resolution for any cash that we spent in the prior year. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the plan right now. So let's break down just a couple of examples of items like, and I apologize, don't stare at the screen or you get busy. So we have the smart meter program. We just adopted it. We know it's about $2.7 million total. I think this is 2.8, but $2.7 million total. When exactly will those dollars be spent? Well, I know some of those can be spent in 2022 because I just ordered $75,000 worth of gas meters as part of this. We're in the process of getting that contract negotiation. They're going to place orders for their parts, but I expect that and these are calendar years, these are not budget years. That's the other thing to keep in mind, because we borrow on a calendar year basis. Even though on a budget, we have a budgetary basis we work on that's end of September. These are all calendar years. So in the calendar year 2022, whether it falls in the budget year or not, I'm fairly certain that I'll be paying some sum of money to Amoresco for their project.
So I don't know, the rest of the world is suffering from the lack of manufacturing. Do you think those meters are going to trickle in over a period of time, or are they going to be able to get the bulk of them?
Well, that's been a big concern. That's why we, I kind of pressed to get that modified approval, if you will, so we could get some stuff on order. Yes, I think things are going to trickle in. So what we've told them on the gas meter side, for instance, is for the ones that the city is ordering and having the contractor from CPS install, is we'll take them as you get them. Just send them to the quantities you have, because we can't install them all at once anyway.
It's probably going to spread out your expenditures a wee bit as well.
Right, and so that's why I'm saying it's a little bit of a hair pulling out exercise, because so you use your best estimates. But this is one where I think, roughly, I think it's going to be around $1 million in 2022. I think the more is going to be spent in 2023, and then there'll be some amount left over in 2024, 20% contingency, et cetera. Using another example, so this is the pond project. So we know that that's currently being engineered. We know there's a certain amount of engineering costs that we're going to pay. We'll probably start construction by the end of the calendar year. We'll have started. We might have a few bills coming in. But the bulk of that expenditure, which is a pretty expensive project, is going to be in 2023. Because it'll start in 2024, we'll get the big bills in 2023, and then there'll probably be some tail end in 2025. So a lot of the major projects are going to be a lot like this. You're going to have some small expenditure in the beginning, whether it's land acquisition or engineering or whatever. Then you're going to have the bulk, if it's a construction project, construction in the middle, and then you'll probably have something in year 3, some small amount. But exactly what those are, it's just kind of guesswork. I was going to pick another one.
Go down to the favorite one.
Is that electric?
Yep.
Okay. So, I should, yes. So, River Bluff, for instance, in 2022, we're anticipating spending $800,000. That's the $600 that we already approved for 2021, right?
Mhm.
And we're still in 21.
Mhm.
We have some expenditure, if you look back, if
Mhm.
I had 2021 up here, we actually have some expenditure from this year. We'll have more 2022, but I think the bulk of the spending will actually be in 2023. And a lot of that goes back to lead times, trying to get the, and knowing that we only ever approved, as of right now, in fact, you've only approved a $600,000 project. So I still have to bring to you for approval, and what we're planning on doing is and this is where I'll give you an update on River Bluff. So thanks to the mayors, just asking more questions and having that open dialogue with the community, he pushed back. We had the engineer kind of telling us, look, you're not going to be able to get someone to do this in the backyards, whether you want it or not. And really, it's just a million times more convenient to be in the front yards. And so we had that public meeting. We got some public input. There were concerns. We knew there would be concerns about moving it and going to the front yard. We knew that there was some added expense in doing that. And again, to the mayor's credit, he was pushing back, saying, "Well, how do you know? Do you know that you can't do it in the backyard?" And staff kind of took the consultant's word that we kind of trusted him maybe a little too much. Didn't ask that question as pointedly as the mayor did, and learned that yes, he'd reach out to some folks, and he couldn't find anybody who's willing to do it in the backyard. But when we pushed him, so we'll see if he can find somebody. Well, he was able to find someone that's willing to do it in the backyard. And lo and behold, we already knew there was some added expense going in the front. So if you can find someone that just does it in the back, as long as they're not going to charge you an arm and a leg, which is what we suspected they would do, you might actually see some cost savings. And that's what we anticipate may happen. Right now, I'm leaving the cost of the project the same as if we were doing it in the front or back. But the fact of the matter is, we think we found a contractor that actually prefers in the backyard and isn't going to try and gouge us, relatively speaking. So what we are going to pursue is a design-build process there. So that means that we would try to get we've got to get, right now what the engineer's working on is doing the rest of the field study. So you only did the field study for that phase 1, the first part of the project. So I've authorized him to just do it for the whole thing. So he started that process. It's going to take survey work and other things like that. They're going to have to find someone that's going to have to pinpoint all of the transformers and whatnot in the backyards and find those types of locations. So he's got to do a little bit of work there. That's probably 6 to 8 weeks of work to get all that done. But I've already let him go do that. And part of what I'm basing this on is the spending authority I have for the 600. Even though y'all didn't approve the overall project, since this is a money saving opportunity for the city, it's just prudent to do that. So he started that process. The goal is then, once he collects enough data to be able to get bids, we wouldn't be able to actually give the contractors the entire project designed and ready to go, but we would be able to give them the links, the quantities, everything they need to build a bid, and then they would bid on a unit price basis, and we would design as we go. So we would say, okay, phase 1's fully designed, for instance, what we would have, will be for the backyard. So we'd say, go do this, and then we'll give you the other pieces. And we'll be able to, in big terms, I mean, we can do that now. We can show them, as we did in the public meeting, here's where everything is now. We've got a good map of that. And here's the added changes. So one of the things that we've incorporated in this program is a looping of the electrical system. So that's still going to stay. So it's not just a matter of replacing what's there, it's improving and replacing. So we'll replace the buried lines with conduit and a line in the conduit, so it'll be easier to maintain and less expensive to maintain. And then we will create the loops that will allow for when there is an outage, it affects your
Redundancy.
people. We're also creating, bringing a three-phase, because now in that same time frame, we've got the Kemps.
Kemp.
Yeah, so now that he's coming, that's gonna build in the ability to bring three-phase from a different direction. So it's more than just the redundancy we originally planned, we're actually bringing three-phase in, and we'll have three-phase redundancy from two ends. So that's River Bluff. That's why you see it spread out the way it is, because again, it's just my best guess that we'll probably spend a ton of money in 2023, and then just a little bit in 2024. But look what happens. Then we actually start the project for Country Village, because Country Village, even though it seems like doing things in a hurry, there's three. First off, they're about where River Bluff was 6 or 8 years ago, when River Bluff started to have major issues. Just as we saw the other night, I mean, they're starting to have those issues. In another 3 years, I don't know where they're going to be, but we're planning on, okay, we're going to start needing to engineer that in 2024 with the potential of actually starting the project in 2025. Idea being that ideally, if we've got a contractor engaged in doing this work and we like the work that's been done, we can maybe kind of keep them involved in starting the project on the heels of the other, potentially, if time works out. So those are two projects, just as an example. You can see others. I showed you the ponds. I think there's a water line project. Yeah, this is the, this would probably be the, what's that water line? Lafayette, yeah. So this is probably the Lafayette project, but we know we're gonna have others. And you can see, these are just, there's not, I mean, it's just a best guess for amount. One of the reasons we timed it, and this was with Michael's input, K-Freeze is here. Persign was suggesting, just like we did with streets, we should try and bundle our water projects and our wastewater projects to get a better deal. So rather than, when I originally had this, like in fact, if you look at the October one, you'll probably see some spending every year for water lines and some spending every year for sewer lines and that kind of thing. And he said, you know, you'd be better off if every 2 or 3 years you did a big project, because you're going to get better quantities and better pricing and that kind of thing. So that's what this is. It's taking those smaller numbers and just putting them into random years that are 2 to 3 years apart. And we did that in a couple of different areas. I did that for the water lines, I did it for the sewer, I think I did a little bit for gas in the same way. So one of the things that I'm very concerned about is the fact that we've got a gas system that we all know, because we deal with the leaks and the concerns to the water and wastewater. No one, including myself or anybody in the utility, has any idea what shape our gas system is in. Like it would be absurd to think that it's better off than our water and sewer system. It's as old. It has the same lack of investment and maintenance that the other lines do. So I fully anticipate it's in a pretty bad way, right? So I plugged in some. Point is, I plugged in some gas money.
May I ask a question? Is that all right? Do we intend to continue like we're doing now, where we essentially outsource almost 100% of it to CPS? Or are we ever going to decide to bite the bullet and hire and do it ourselves?
One, if we're going to start replacing the system, we're going to be doing that by contract anyway. But my preference, it's up to you all to tell me what you prefer, but I would advise you that outsourcing is, you're probably getting a better deal. Now, we need to evaluate that contract on a pretty regular basis and make sure we're getting our money's worth, as it were. But right now, I think it's costing us 60 or 80 grand.
But don't we always sole source to the same company? So we're not getting the best deal. I mean, we're getting the best deal we can for one company, but
60
we have no
grand,
competition.
but look at it this way, 60 grand a year for maintenance of our system. I can't hire a person for 60
Okay,
grand.
I'm not arguing.
Yeah, but I know, but that's my point. So I
That's
think,
CPS?
yeah, that's CPS. So I think personally, CPS being such a larger system, they're going to get better deals. They're going to have better ability to hire and maintain and train staff. than we would to attract and train and maintain staff. It's already a challenge, and as John knows, dealing with utilities, we're having to compete with Hondo and anybody else who has a bigger budget than we do on our pay. Our pay is about $2 to $3 less an hour than most of our folks can leave and not change their travel time by much at all, 10 minutes, one direction or another, and they can make $2 more an hour.
So the foreseeable future, we'll just continue doing what we're doing.
Yes. So in direct answer, I have no plans to change that. It's not that it won't ever change, it could. I mean, especially if CPS has its own issues and problems that they deal with. But right now, it seems to be working, and I wouldn't recommend changing it.
I think it was 2 years ago, I guess, we did look at other gas providers, and CPS came in very price competitive and probably has better, quicker, more responsive servicing than anybody else was going to.
Yeah, we really haven't had an issue on the service side,
No,
frankly. The
no.
first issue I'm having is I'm asking them to replace 300 meters, and like, yeah, we can't do that. We don't have the capacity to go change 300 meters. We can do 6 at a time, like we've been doing, and do, every little bit, to do 300 all at once. So I'm working to get a bid from their contractor, and we're going to compare that bid to what Amoresco's providing on the labor side to see if it's going to work. I'm praying it'll be CPS for a lot of reasons. I think it'll be better. Well, but we don't have their bids yet, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, CPS internally, I mean, they told us on the call that they're actually still billing us at the 2014 rate. And he said it like, and the way he responded, it was like, well, we're still billing. Anyway, I was like, well, okay, that's your problem. Like, okay, but you're still, it's, because I basically was indicating, look, I really, we can't afford to spend a ton of money doing this.
I didn't say anything, just.
You guys did are doing a great job, and this is what it costs us. And he's like, oh, well, that's like an old rate. I'm going,
Just backtrack, pretend that's not.
okay, but that's what you billed us, so. Anyway, yeah, it's good. There are some projects in here that I've taken the liberty of adding that really, I just plugged in numbers. So I know, for instance, public safety facility. So what I'm going to do right now is I just want to hit the whiteboard and show you. So there you see the red was high priority. Public safety center had 2 red stars and a green. Green was number 4. So it was considered fairly high priority to at least 2 of you. And I put just a number of $5 million. Well, it's $4.5 million is what I've got here. And I've got it in the year 2028. Why 2028? I don't know. I just, in part because I figured we can staff up a little bit in our existing building. Now, we do need to make some roof repairs, which is what this $40,000 is. We have to do that fairly quickly. But as far as outgrowing the facility, it really is going to depend on when we start adding staff. Now, one of the options for adding staff, there is a SAFER grant that isn't always available, but can be available from time to time, and it pays between 12 months and 24 months. It depends on what they're doing in the given grant cycle for public safety, fire and police. So if you wanted to add people under the SAFER grant, you basically have to guarantee that they'll pay you the first 18 months of that labor cost, and then the city's on the hook forever after that, right? But you're guaranteeing you're going to keep those positions and you're not going to lay off other people. So if I hire you 8, I can't go fire 8 others from a different area. Like I have to keep, well, I mean, there's some cities that they did that kind of stuff. But no, I'm keeping those. So we could, the reason I bring that up is what that in essence does is it reduces your cost significantly. Now you still have to buy vehicles for all people, you still have to equip them, you still have to train them. I mean, there are operational costs that the grant does not cover. But if the city is in a position to afford that, then we could potentially bring people on even sooner than the development warrants. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So like,
Well, it's better to get in front of that anyway. I think that's a great option because, I mean, that's the first thing that we're going to have to add is police force as we start adding new residents.
well, we are kind of keeping a close eye on it because even I've been kind of just telling the chief, as I've told you all, like I'm planning on let's keep our O&M rate. We're going to lock that in for 3 or 4 years. We're going to have to live lean and mean until the growth from the east side catches up and creates that ability to adopt a higher rate. We're still going to have to take it to the voters because even though it's doing this, you can't Unfortunately, you can't just say, well, we're going to keep the element in here. And look, guys, it's still cheaper than it was. The state says, no, 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 you have 3%. So even if growth causes your rate to drop, you're probably going to have to take it to the voters at some point, depending on what the cost is. A grant would forestall that. A grant, you don't have to, if you're getting grant funds to pay for everything and you don't need to raise tax rates to do that, then you could do it sooner than later. But we're keeping our ears to the ground because there's, as you know, there's border security issues. The state's made various choices and decisions that may impact us positively. Some of them are going to be negative, but some of them could be positive from a workforce standpoint, where there may be money to hire the people or whatever. So I know the chief is watching that very closely, and I've got folks that are looking into that as well.
Have we ruled out the idea of substations? In other words, we're saying we're okay, and then we're going to wait, and then we're going to make a new facility. Have we ever given any thought to substations?
No, I don't think this is, I think that's an item that the city council might want to consider when we look at expanding the force, and whenever we look at that. I'm sure that there's studies out there that probably talk about the pros and cons of low substations.
If you put the substation where you're ultimately going to put the new one.
Yeah.
Start off small and then you expand it.
Yeah. In a city our size, personally, I don't know that makes a whole lot of sense. But again, I think that's something we have a longer dialogue about on another day. But bottom line, you're doubling your facility cost. Really. I mean, double
Really,
electricity,
your
double water.
responding officers are already on patrol in many cases, so.
Right.
They're
It
not
does,
really
but the
waiting.
pros are, people see that, hey, I've got a police deal right there, but I've seen them. I mean, Fort Worth does that, but Fort Worth is huge. And some of those substations, there's no one ever there.
Right, it's empty.
But it looks like a donut shop. It's in a strip center. It's right there, and it says, but I mean, I don't know. Like I said, there's pros and cons, but that's something that we should debate, I think, when we get closer to doing something like that. So I've plugged this number in here. I also plugged in a number for the library. That's just because I know at some point when we double our population, there may be a need to invest in the library, but this library could just as easily be a civic center or a community center or something else. So I'm going to share this out with you all. Just looking at the parks specifically, one of the things I'm recommending is that we make a huge investment in 2022 in Lions Park. And the Parks Board will do a specific briefing with you all on the ideas they have planned. But I budgeted, a nice big round number of $250,000 there, and then the regional park $150,000, and then the next year kind of be the regional park's turn, and I budgeted $350,000 there. I've also added a grant line. I don't have any specific grants in mind, but I know that Texas Parks and Wildlife has grants, and they're 50-50. So in any given year where we're going to spend $350,000, we should be able to get a grant for at least $200,000 or maybe $250,000, right? So I've just plugged in some grants that kind of line up in years where we're spending quite a bit of money on parks. And then I've got the ball fields in here, and I've got the welcome signs in here, and I've got there was something else, the multi-purpose facility in here. So this will be shared out with you all, so you can go look at it. The goal is to establish. The goal is to establish something that looks like the CIP that Westlake did that I showed you all. I want to get there. Once we have these identified and we kind of have some rough numbers, we're going to backfill this with actual specifics where you can look at, for instance, when it says lift station upgrades, well, that's not just one lift station, that's all the lift stations. And we have very specific things we can do. We need fencing put around them, we need pumps replaced, some of them need to be upsized at a considerable expense. So we can detail all that in a detail sheet that just deals with lift stations and tells you here's what the timing of those different projects are and how much they cost, and you can get an idea of. And so instead of just saying regional park, $250,000, you can see, okay, no, these are the things that they're looking at doing at regional park. These are the things they're looking at doing at Lions Park, and these are the estimated costs for each of those. The other part I was going to show you is fleet and equipment. So this is a little bit of a change from what we had before. I've folded this into the borrowing. I spoke to our financial advisor earlier today, and they recommended that we actually, what they will do is they'll do different amortization tables for the vehicles, because you don't want to borrow 20-year money for a 10-year vehicle. But you can do a separate amortization table just for the vehicles, for the amount of borrowing. The equipment probably will be on a 20-year, but we can tailor that. And by tailoring that, we actually end up spending quite a bit less. Our borrowing costs will be quite a bit less than if we were to go to just a traditional lease route, where we go to a leasing financing company and they do it. Because they're taking a lot of risk, the leasing company is. They know that all they have is that vehicle that may or may not be worth what is still owed on the note. Whereas here, we don't have to mess with any of that. So the point, I just want to point to this briefly. This is, it's got all of our equipment on there. There's more information I want to add, like mileage, where there's mileage missing. We'll need to add that in. The only one that really has that is the PD right now. Some of these vehicles have already been replaced or are on order. Believe it or not, we have one that we ordered in 2020 that we have not received yet. We have one that we ordered in 2021 that has not been received yet, which also means that even though in those budget years you agreed to spend that money, it was never spent. It went back into fund balance, and unfortunately it also means we have to reappropriate that. It doesn't stay encumbered after that
calendar
budget
year?
Yeah.
Our budget year?
Yeah, so we'll have to re-encumber it, if you will. Even though it's already been placed on order, it is encumbered, but we're going to have to
Money's there, but
issue a new PO and kind of, yeah, and the money's there, right? It went into fund balance. So we have to order another, there's 2 more vehicles, and I don't have exact amounts. I just know that they're going up. I think I increased it by $2,000 to $5,000 a year, depending on outer years, just knowing that's the way vehicle prices have been lately. So I've got $45,000 programmed for 2 vehicles in 2023. These would be Tahoes that we've ordered. And then I've got the amounts for the ones that have already been placed on order. And we've got a similar situation for some of our parks and utility fleet. But all this is out there, and you can go look at it. I've got it broken out by cost, by year, by general fund, and by utility fund. It's a lot in the first 2 years. It's about $580,000 each of those 2 years, but it kind of tapers off after that. And looking at the CIP, it's been accounted for. So when you look down here, it's included, and it's included in that bond borrowing piece. So that's part of that finagling I've been doing, is trying to, okay, some of these things we're spending a ton of utility fund cash, and we didn't have the cash. So I had to find ways to spend that using bond money and just move stuff around. So that's what's been going on. This little grayed out number, if you happen to notice it, all that is my way of checking to make sure that the numbers add up. So this is the total of all the expenditures for any given year. And then this is how they've been, the colors of money I described earlier. And these 2 numbers should add up. So that's what this is down here. So I know you can barely read it, but that's on purpose. And yeah, when you get China, you can mess with it and see. But all the good news is, one of the things I did earlier is I just did equals this minus this. And it should be zeros all the way across, right? If I've done my homework correctly, and it is. So, but it wasn't that way. I've had a lot of stuff I have to dig out and find. So, y'all have, is there any discussion you want to have about just this? I know Herb's got a presentation I want to allow him to do.
I got a question about this.
Mm-hmm.
In the budget book, under capital, there's 1 page
Yes.
on the utility drainage utility fund 16.
Yes.
Okay, how does what you've just shown us, shouldn't it be in the budget? I mean, otherwise, we approved money for the year. At the end of the year, citizens are going to hold us accountable. Shouldn't we have something in there that says, here's our roadmap for the year? So at the end of the year, we can say, we turned off to the right in January and we didn't do anything? or we did it and now we've done everything?
Yeah, so what I did in part as a policy-making document, we scraped out all of the capital from the budget. It wasn't that we weren't going to spend any capital, we knew we had capital expenditures. But since the capital largely had been unfinanced and we were funding some of it with cash, which was not prudent to do, I scraped it all out so that we could have this discussion. But you're absolutely right, we're going to have to, now that once the CIP is adopted by you all, which I'm anticipating in the first part of next year, so I've got work in between now and December. We'll develop those pages, and those will be presented to you along with the Parks Master Plan and some other pieces, and then you will formally adopt that. And when you adopt that, we'll probably have a budget amendment document that will amend the budget to reflect the spending that's identified in the capital plan. And the budget, more than anything, it'll be, because as I stated, a lot of it's not cash, it'll be debt service. So you'll be adopting the debt service payment, which is what you're doing anyway when you issue the bonds. You're, in essence, by issuing those bonds, you're committing to the city paying back those bonds, and you're by virtue of doing that, adjusting the budget.
But those
Correct.
those bond servicing fees are not in the budget because they haven't been made
Correct.
yet.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking for is, where do we go to find the official, what the plan is? And I understand we never had a plan, and you're moving toward a plan, and maybe this year we won't have one. And maybe next year we'll be able to do the first one.
So ideally, by March, at the latest, you'll have an official plan that you can publish on the website, that you all will formally adopt, and that will be the place you go to know how you're spending on your capital. The budget, unfortunately, will not reflect that. We'll amend it by ordinance, but we aren't going to print a new budget book that will show that. The next year's budget, we will probably start showing the capital back in the budget, but the way I'm going to show it to you all will be it'll be different. So you'll have an operating budget for every department, and then you'll have a capital, like a separated out, here's what the capital investment is. And we'll probably put the CIP in the back of the plan.
I just think that next year there's going to be an election, a municipal election,
Yeah,
in April.
yeah.
When you expect voters to vote for elected officials, they ought to have the ability to see the whole budget, the whole plan, because that's how they're going to grade the ones that are sitting here. And if you don't give them any numbers, that's not good, because then they wonder, what are you hiding? So I'm just suggesting, in our plan, I'm fully in agreement with you that we're migrating toward a new, better way of doing it, and this is all good. But we ought to be in a point before the next election where the people who live in the city can see what we say is the record. This is what we passed.
And I believe you'll be in that position. That's my goal, of being in that position. I'm not 100% control, because a lot of it has to do with you all, but certainly the planning is at a point where I feel confident by March we'll have something, and if we do it sooner, we'll do it sooner. Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Related to Herb's discussion, in reality, next year, there could be 3 new council people, Herb, which means everything beyond 22,
Right.
it's changed. If
Could-
the new
could
council
get
comes
changed,
in,
for sure.
they'll have, they could say, oh, we don't like what you all have done, we don't like you putting us in debt. So it's really gonna be
Yeah, they're
and
gonna
that's
be-
historically never happened, so
Right.
hopefully it comes across as in a positive light, but in reality, the only thing we really control is, as you said earlier, this council. Next council comes in next year.
You can obligate in certain ways, though. So you've already issued the debt. The debt is an obligation that you can't cancel as a council. So once that debt gets issued, you've made commitments. It has, for instance, payoff clauses in it. So even if the new council came and said, well, I don't want this money anymore, just give it back. Well, there may be a penalty, like that's an early buyback. You may not have early buyback provision, or the first call date might be 5 years from now. So basically, you have you're in some respects, you are obligating future councils when you go issue debt. And that's true all over the state.
Really,
right?
for expenditures, not, because you're obligating future councils to pay off a debt from an expenditure that we already started. We're
But
not
you aren't
gonna
obligated to
cancel.
the projects, so they can use that money for whatever they want.
Right.
Except that there is an official notice
Right.
that goes with that debt issue that says it must be used for these purposes. Now, we're gonna make those, and you'll hear later tonight from Noel Valdez. Noel, anyway, with our bond attorney, our bond counsel, what that language is. But it's pretty broad. I'm purposely leaving it broad, so it'll be water infrastructure and streets, and I mean, it's all the things we need to get done. But it also means that a future council can say, I don't want to spend $1 million on electrical in River Bluff. I want to spend $1 million on streets somewhere else. And let's do, instead of spending, $1 million and change every year, let's spend $2 million and change every year on streets. They could do that.
But again, that'll be, and in this city has turned down $1 million grant for it. So when the new council came in, they gave the money back and pissed off everybody. So new councils can do a whole lot.
I do think, though, that you all are having, that by having the dialogue we've had, having the meetings we've had, now granted, there's always people that say, well, I didn't know. And it's almost like they expect you to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, by the way, we're having a really important discussion tonight. You might want to be there. So that's part of the frustrating part about public service. But I do think that the fact that you're laying out a coherent, prudent, well-designed investment plan that has a sustainable funding source, that's not bankrupting the city, that is actually still leaving the city in a very strong financial position, and that is reasonable and from a rate-making standpoint. So you've reassured the taxpayers, for instance, from the tax rate, that you're not going to increase it beyond what we've already established. You're reassuring them because we've committed to a rate plan for the next 5 years. Here's what our rates, our utility rates are going to be. So I think doing those types of things, you're bookending some pretty important topics for voters and for taxpayers like myself and everybody here. So hopefully you won't have people that get on and they're just fed up, because you would have heard from them, right? Or we'll hear from them in January and in February when they start getting the utility bills.
Well, I think that the fact that you pushed that CIP out to 10 years in itself is going to be a big help for citizens, because now they're going to hear about things year after year. Every time the budget cycle gets completed, they're going to get reminded. And as things get closer, they're going to get discussed more, they're going to get bracketed, they're going to get more exact. So people now have a much better ability to look out for the foreseeable future and feel like they're making progress, which in the past, I don't think we've ever had that.
Well, in my experience, just watching other communities go through this, there are changes to CIP. It's a living document, in the same way there's changes to budget. But they're usually minor changes, and they're ones that it's because the community says, oh, they get used to the idea of investment, and then they say, well, if we're going to invest in something, we really want a library, right? And there's this big group that said, we want a new library, and so we might have had it out in 2029, but all of a sudden it's going to be pulled in because of, or maybe it's baseball fields, or maybe it's something else, or that kind of thing. So I've seen the changes happen as you have folks come in, but it's usually less about that person that gets elected, at least in my experience, and more the changes to the CIP specifically have more to do with the changing landscape, that we all live in, and the changing desires and kind of needs of the community at large. So. All right. Any other questions about this? With that, I think I want to turn it over to Herb to do his presentation.
All right, before we move on to the next one, how much time do you think we're going to need for item number 6?
What is 6?
That's the discussion on creating municipal utility rate.
Not much time at all.
Okay, cool. So then, what do you think, 15 minutes?
Less.
Okay. All right.
Because I don't have anything specific. I got a call from Ramsey, and I was in the middle of something, and I said, I'll call you back, and then I never called back. So.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to scope it out. I've got a hard stop at 4:30.
Yeah, I've been watching the clock.
So do you?
I won't need more than about 8 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
I think we're going to finish it.
That works out really
As
well.
long as I can get the slides on slide 1.
All right. So the next item.
I'm just trying to move you along.
Look,
Thanks.
look, he's up. All right.
So the next item is briefing on a future community complex from Councilman Herb Dyer. And I want to thank Councilman Dyer for his persistence yet patience with us. This has been, he has put this together quite some time ago,
July
and
27th.
we continue to push it out. We've had a lot of really high priority things, so I appreciate your flexibility. And I pushed back on it initially because it's not funded, and there's, like, we don't have the money to do this, and we know that it's going to be a whole lot of money, but to Herb's point, he wants to get people thinking about this. He wants to provide this as a vision, and I really respect that. So I'm going to shut up now and let you go. Otherwise, Todd's going to
Okay,
take
well,
over.
the purpose of this short briefing is to talk about a vision. I'm not asking you for money, I'm asking you to start thinking about long-term, some things that I think are very important. And I can do this right. How do I go to the next one?
You can just slide the roller ball.
Roller ball?
It's,
Yeah.
the middle roller.
It's on a website. It's a
There
PDF.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. A little bit of background. In our master plan, there's a little bit of talk about how we handle the community requirements for recreation and other things, but not much. In our vision plan back in 2016, there's a little bit of discussion, but there's really nothing. If you go back and read these documents, these things didn't get much effort. So my goal was to create a more complex master plan, to start looking out into the future on these kinds of parks and recreation facilities. So I've come up with this vision for a Castroville Community Complex. That's what I call it. You may want to call it something else. But anyway, we got a briefing on the City Council in April. I wasn't here then, but you got a briefing from the Parks and Recreations people, and they showed you a vision for long term. And they told you that they were working on a plan, and they had a consultant from Microsoft that was committed to, that was paid for, and on a grant, and that they were working diligently on putting together a long-term vision for parks. Now, in all fairness, what I came up with and what they came up with was two independent efforts. And I'm not trying to sell you an idea that they came up with, all right? I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to add to what they're already doing. But it's important to know that if you look at the way they developed their plan, they did it with surveys, they went out, they did a survey that had almost as many respondents as we got for electing the mayor, within 3. So they did a pretty comprehensive survey, and it tracks a lot with what I'm going to talk about. So there's a lot of interest in the community in these particular parks and recreation aspects. They are planning to submit that long-term plan. They thought they would get it into the city by the end of the fiscal year, which was 30 September, and they didn't get it in yet. But it's still being worked on, and we're going to get it soon. So we will need to create, once we get that plan, we'll have to start thinking about the long term, because it's going to cost a lot of money to do the things they're going to suggest and the things that I'm going to suggest to you in a moment. So let's just, for just a minute, if I can get this to agree. Come on. Down. Up. Down. Up.
You can hear it.
There. Okay. Now, for just a moment, let's just forget about money and let's just talk about the goal. This is a vision for about a 85 to 100 acre hunk of land somewhere in the city. And in that hunk of land, there's going to be 4 big pieces. And we've already talked about most of these during the budget process. At various times, we've talked about various pieces. So let's talk about the orange piece first. A lighted athletic complex. That's probably 30 acres of land, maybe, give or take. And it's not just baseball fields. It's every kind of popular athletic field that requires a special field to play on. And it should cover a broad range of different sports. And it should also contain the kind of things you need if you want to do track and field competition. you intersperse the track and field events all over the area. And you think of this area as a well-lighted, integral thing with bicycle paths, all connected, general public use facility, professionally designed. And you know, we have a lot of examples. I think Phil brought up several examples during the CIP process discussion. So this is probably one of the most important because we have so much pressure on us from the FAA to get the ball fields off the airport because of the lights. So this more than likely would end up in the long-term vision as probably the first and highest priority piece. The gray part on the bottom, Youth Recreation Center, Teen Activities Social Center, and Senior Activity Center. We don't have anything in this town. We got a McDonald's that I call the senior center because all of my old fart friends, that's where we go for breakfast. I mean, we don't have anything for our kids. We don't have anything to give them an alternative to things that are out there tempting them right now. Someplace that's safe, that their parents have confidence, is well written, well run, that's got adults in charge, that's safe, that the police watch out for. And that's what this complex is designed to be. It's probably a little bit smaller, maybe in the 20-acre. But again, it's not just a building sitting out in the field. It's a complex with bicycle paths, picnic tables. The whole plot of land should be integrated in with the other one if they happen to be co-located. And I kind of visualize for this thing as a big multi-purpose gymnasium in the center. And then you got things for old people, things for young people, things for teenagers that give them a desire to go there because they can have fun and they can meet with their friends and they choose to go there. It's going to be something that's going to require professional staff. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to have to be maintained. But it's something we don't have today, and I know we got a lot of kids that are in another 10 years going to be teenagers. And I really like to think that we could provide them a place to go.
Can I ask you a quick question? So one of the things that it's interesting listening to you describe it because I'm thinking about the regional park and some of the plans that the park boards had there and some of the things that I've been looking at just.
If I could get you to sit on that for just a minute, I'm going to talk about it in the next chart.
Okay.
I know what you're going at. Let's talk now about the green piece. We've had lots of discussions about swimming pools. I think we all agree we need a better swimming pool. Now, what we're going to do and what the school district's going to do is yet to be seen, but we all believe we need something better. If we don't start thinking about it now, we won't be ready in 15 or 20 years if we don't start now. It's going to cost millions and millions of dollars, and we've got to start now. We've got to start thinking about what do we really want? Do we want it indoors, outdoors? Do we want swimming and diving? Do we want both? Do we want it to be Olympic certified so maybe we can attract national trials to our city? Do we want to make it something that we could get into the loop with the city of San Antonio for high school competitions, rotations, lots of tourism implications? But we got to decide, and we got to start thinking about it because it isn't going to happen if we don't allocate money and start planning for it. That's pretty cut and dry. And, I think the school board's looking at the same thing. So there's probably a lot of serendipity with that one. Then the blue one. The blue one is what I call special use because it is going to be designed for niches. Kids like skateboards. You got to have a special track for skateboards. So you put something like that in there. Little kids like water activities where the parents, the mother or the father can take them out there on a hot day and not risk them drowning, but they can be in the water. So there's water activities. Picnic tables, pavilions, things that families can use with their kids. That's what this is intended to be. Maybe rock wall, something like that. And also, there's some niches for special needs children. They don't have much to do in this town. But maybe we could create some things in that complex that are really attractive to families that have special needs children. So it's kind of a catch-all. And then the black area is, if we put it in one place, it's all got to be engineered and built in phases and put together. So that's kind of the vision. It's not perfect, and it doesn't mean that you have to build it this way, but this is a starting point to think about it. Now, to the point I think that Scott was making. This doesn't necessarily have to be a 100-acre contiguous piece of land. That might be great if we can do it, but as time marches on, the probability of us being able to put something together contiguous is pretty low. So it could be spread out. It doesn't have to be in one place. The Economic Development Corporation that we just created is going to give us the ability to barter and trade and mix and match. So we do have a better capability in the future to start formulating a land plan. We have to look at other things in Texas. There's lots of them. Find out what works and what doesn't. We don't want to make the mistake of building something and then finding out it doesn't meet certifications. You've got to learn what the certifications are first and then build to meet the certifications. So you're guaranteed that when you're finished, you got what you wanted. We got to start thinking generally. Every year we got to think about this and decide a little bit more detail, a little bit more on the schedule, a little bit more on the priorities. And then we have to look for ways to pay for it. And as Scott's pointed out numerous times, there's lots of possibilities. We just have to leverage the ones that make the best sense for us. But if we don't put it in the long-range plan, it'll never get done. We have to create a phased approach. I've already mentioned that. Public hearings. This is the part that I think is one of the most important aspects. You have to create a vision. You have to get the public aware of the vision, and they have to get interested in the vision if you want it to survive. So we need to start that process. And then as the capital improvement plan matures, these ideas begin to mature, and you start seeing the pieces in those out years. And then another thing, people are dying every day in our town. And they have land and they have money. And many of them, if they knew about this vision and they really liked it, they might want to donate some of their estate to it. So all the time that passes where we don't make this plan known, we have opportunities lost where we might get donations of land or even large sums of money. Very quickly, I'll just finish. I'm going to kind of take some shortcuts on this, but I just want to make the statement that when the Parks and Rec Board brings us their plan, it's going to be a well thought out plan. It's going to have a lot of effort in it. And I'm not asking you to usurp their plan with this one. I'm asking you to think about the two together and figure out a way that they might merge where there's serendipity. The important thing about it is when they bring us their plan, it's not going to be ready to adopt and put into the long-term plan the first day. You're going to have questions. The city staff's going to have questions about their plan, and they're going to be asking us questions about this vision. So we need to get it started so that over the period of this coming calendar year, or this current fiscal year is what I mean to say, we're already in FY22 now. So by September 30th of next year, in 2022, we should be in a position where we have a clear vision of what we want to do for the city and a clear vision of how we might pay for it. And then we can put it into the long-term plan formally, where it gets more visibility. So that's what I just wanted to present, and if you got any questions, I probably don't have any answers, but I'll take a crack at it. I'm done.
Did Scott's question get answered?
No, I was just curious. Yeah, I never really thought about this, but one of the things I've been pursuing on my own is whether or not the ability exists to expand regional park. And we have to be careful. It's a public meeting, so I don't want. But I think there could be the opportunity to work with adjacent landowners to look at expansion of regional park. And if that were the case,
You can't have my property.
If you could double the size, see it?
He's moving me out already.
I haven't talked to you about the price yet. You
Eminent-
haven't heard the price.
Eminent domain.
You're gonna love it. It's free.
Yeah, a little eminent domain on
The only problem
east
you
side.
have with that area is it's in a floodplain. so-
Yes, so you
That's
have to
right.
be wise about the investments you make. So
Yeah.
you have to look at where you put those things and what types of investments you make in those areas as far as fields. But fields, by and large, you're talking about soccer and sports fields, I think a lighted field complex could very easily be in the floodplain over on both sides. It already is. So, improving the existing park, improving the actual fields themselves, the lighting in the existing park, that kind of stuff. I was just wondering how you felt about some of those things. I kind of was thinking what you were thinking, which is originally, like, if we look at a 50-acre parcel, let's look at development of that. And we talked to third parties that might be willing to do that on a commercial basis. Like, it wouldn't be a city-owned property necessarily. It would be a for-profit run facility. We've looked at those types of things, but I didn't really consider what you were talking about until you were presenting, that some of those aspects could be a regional park.
Sure.
Not all of them, but some of them could be there. I know that there's an opportunity to expand and improve on the facility that's there, the old pool facility. We've been talking about building a new one, right? But when you build a new one, if we were able to leverage, there's grants that are $1.5 million to $2 million that you can get if you're in that larger grant pool and the city's willing to commit matching funds, where you could build a very nice facility at Regional Park, and it would be the indoor, much larger. But that is not, as far as I know, on the table. They've talked about doing an indoor facility, but it was more like on the order of $400,000, for the facility.
To be honest with everybody, when I envisioned this with the green box right down on 471 with the high school off to the right, Victory Lane along the bottom, and Highway 90 on the left going along the orange. That plot of land is where I was thinking when I thinking about this. If we had no constraints and you could do everything you wanted to do, that's where I was thinking about this kind of a complex. But as time goes on, that's going to diminish, and it's going to get sold, and we're not going to be able to have those capabilities.
There'll be houses and
But
lots there.
I agree with you. It could be anywhere. It could be wherever the city can best benefit, where the most value per
Well, it
dollar.
doesn't all have to be in one location. Even though
No,
it'd be ideal.
absolutely not.
We could leverage the assets we already have.
That would help with access if it wasn't all in one spot.
And if it was spread out too, we could put bicycle paths between them, walking paths. It would really enhance our town. You could get a long trail that would go around all four of these things if you spread them out. If you could, think about it in the long term. And anything's possible if you start
That's right.
and you set yourself up to.
You just gotta start
Be
asking those questions.
successful.
Well, some of those questions, just are being asked. we
And
are
none of
having-
it's free.
Yeah.
So there's somebody's got to pay for it.
But I mean, the conversations about some of the vision that you've had, that's been shared privately with specific individuals. And I think those wheels are starting to turn. What fruit they'll bear and when is to be determined, but I think some of those conversations are already happening. Do you want to move on to the fee?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the thinking, unless anybody else had any
No, Herb,
comments,
thank you
questions.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Herb, for all your
Thank
effort
you. It's about time. I've been waiting for this for,
since July
You
27th.
told me, you tell me when it was the right time.
it's the right time. No, this is goodness. I mean, we're looking out for how do we make this place a great place, and we know that we can't afford it, and that's okay.
But I think including the CIP document, even if it's kind of unfunded or in the
Yep.
private funding category, until we identify actionable steps, starts to put that in the
When
public eye.
I submitted the CIP to Scott a long time ago, I started in the 24, 25 years timeframe to buy the land, 26 to maybe do the athletic facility, and then you have to figure out, all the way out to 2030. It's not going to happen overnight,
No.
but it's never going to happen if you don't start.
Yeah, that's great. On the municipal rate, what I did,
You want me to open up you want me to move to the next item?
Sure. I think we're just talking all at once. We didn't really.
All right, now, next item is discussion on creating a municipal utility rate.
Timestamp?
Date stamp.
Yep,
So-
today, 4:50.
Ramsey or Schneider Engineering made a couple of recommendations. One of them was on solar. They recommended we change how we're doing our solar customer rates. It's been told to me like 3 times, I can't remember. Well, the way we're doing it, the way we're settling up those charges and stuff, really isn't the industry practice, and it's goofy. And he recommended doing it differently. And the way we're doing it really benefits that solar owner, and the way we should be doing it should be benefiting the utility. Because right now, it has to do with the power, they're getting, I think they're getting a power credit that is equal to the power credit that we would have through CPS, but that's not realistic. It's not the same. You know, the power delivery factor is totally different. What they produce versus what we receive from CPS. So there's different costs. Anyway, so we're basically overcompensating in some respects. So he made a specific recommendation there that was in the first presentation, but it was not in the second. And the other thing that we did not do, which was just a complete miss on my, swing and miss on my part, was when we started the rate study, I did not have him talking about municipal utility rates. That was brought up kind of during that process by Mr. Dyer again. And so I've gone back to him just to ask what his recommendation would be, or if he has any, having done the study, does he have specific rates that he'd recommend for each or not? But ostensibly, a municipal utility rate would simply be the city paying cost, not paying, right now what we do is we pay the residential rate, I believe. But we would pay like what we estimate the actual cost of water production to be, which is something south of, something less than what our rate is, right? Because our rate recovers a little more than cost to invest in infrastructure, that kind of thing. So that becomes the municipal utility rate. So I will bring back for council consideration at some future meeting the actual recommended rates, and then we would just amend our rate table to create a municipal utility rate. And we'd probably also amend the table to reflect the solar electric. Those are two things that I'll try to bring back to you. And like I said, I'd had a call in to Ramsey. He called me back. I was in front of somebody. I couldn't take the call. And I never called back. So I need to reach out to him again.
Scott, related to that, I thought you told us some months ago, or somebody told us, that the municipal rate was substantially less than the residential.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. It'd be less.
Right
than
now, it's substantially less.
No.
And
Right now, it is the residential rate.
you think
right?
it's a residential?
Yeah. Right now, we charge ourselves residential rate, and where that matters is, I'm having discussions. Well, I'll be meeting with NGYBA on Monday to talk to their president about the contracts. Believe it or not, the contract hasn't been signed. There's been all kinds of fiasco within their issue, their organization. So one of the issues is the water. They have 12 acre feet, which is every acre foot is just short of 1 million gallons. So a little less than 12 million gallons that they can use, and they can use up to 3 million in one month. Yeah, 3 acres, which would be almost 3 million in 1 month is what the contract reads. So obviously that's not right, but I will tell you, our actual water costs, the bill that we bill ourselves to support NBYBA that they do not pay us for, and this is not an NBYBA discussion, but I'm just sharing you anecdotally why the municipal rate matters, is around $24,000 to $26,000 worth of water that we pay, the parks pays, so that the baseball field they can water their fields. So we could save ourselves a little bit of money just by not charging the utilities, not charging the general fund that amount of money for that water. There's not a lot of examples of that, frankly.
But on that rate, because it's airport water, then you have to pay, because we're paying the airport.
Yeah, possibly, I paid it.
And
Well,
therefore, it has to be fair market value, so that's different than
Yeah.
our other rates.
I don't know if that's how it's actually working.
Yeah, that's what they told us, is that because it's the airport water, that's why we have to rent the fields, is we
Okay.
can't, it has to be fair market rates,
So I don't, yeah.
that we have to pay for that.
So are we,
Well, except that I will tell you, that's true, but there are things that the city can negotiate, because the city is the city and the city owns the airport. We can negotiate with ourselves to the benefit of the airport. So for instance, just hypothetically speaking, if we had a developer come along and say, we want to tie into the airport system, and the airport system then had a redundant water supply, that redundant water supply has value. The ability to have a redundant supply has value. So we could horse trade and say, okay, if we hook up to the system and we make improvements to the water well and some other things, then we, a trade-off would be the city charges itself at the municipal rate for any water use that we have at the airport. Right?
As long as it goes to the airport.
But my point is, there's value, you just have to illustrate that the airport receives some kind of value
Fair
in
market value.
exchange. Yeah.
Fair market value. Because the state's looking over our shoulder.
Yes, but again, fair market value is.
Yeah.
It's fair market value for
Fair
a
market
municipal
value.
rate.
It really just means it's negotiated. And anytime you negotiate it, you're negotiating at market rates, if you want to do that.
As long as our left hand is being honest with our right hand.
Right.
Yes.
Yep, right. But I think there's ways to do it. That's the discussion on municipal water.
Understand.
All right,
Municipal-
anything else?
Yeah, like, when I submitted this item to be discussed, I was really thinking more about gas.
About the pool?
Because at the time, we were discussing this pool and heating the pool. So it seems to me, if we're selling ourselves gas to heat a city facility, that we ought to try to sell it to ourselves at the lowest possible
And
cost.
it'd be about half, just so you know.
So
Right,
that was
it'd be
my
about-
motive for putting this, asking them to put it on the agenda, because I think there's gonna come a time down the road where we're gonna have a heated pool, and we're gonna have to buy a lot of gas, so I'd like to pay less for it.
Yeah, it'd be about half.
Yeah, we just have to be we have to be really careful about how we reallocate that. If you pull revenue out for a municipal rate, then you've got to replace that with other revenue to be able to support the
Yeah,
O&M and the.
and I've looked at that. So like the municipal rates, if we implement them today, the revenue difference to the utility systems is inconsequential.
Okay.
And where he's talking about gas, it's actually new revenue. And
I'm
we
sure.
just pay our buy cost.
Right.
So,
It just
It'd be about
doesn't make
half.
sense to take money out of the general fund to pay the bill to put it back in the general fund.
well, it goes to the utility fund. It doesn't go to the general. That's the thing, is right now, when we pay our utility rates, it's going to either airport or utilities.
Right.
And it's leaving the general fund and not coming back.
Right.
That's a little bit of a problem.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for the time. Thanks for ending early. We are through this, so we're going to adjourn at, what time is it? 4:21.